Phoenix Suns fans have been waiting for this day for more than a decade. Eric Gordon is a Phoenix Sun. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll break down that signing, and I'll tell you my biggest takeaway from the Suns' strategy in free agency so far. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to start this strange holiday week, but the NBA world is still in full swing. We're free and available everywhere, so wherever you are finding this show, hit follow or subscribe, and we will be right there in your feed every single day throughout the offseason and beyond. We have a lot to get to today. Eric Gordon, my thoughts, my biggest takeaway on the Suns offseason, now that the roster is basically full, and a quick kind of power ranking index of the rest of the Western Conference. Some winners, some losers, and where the Suns stand. But let's start with Gordon. He was recently cut by the Clippers for $20 million, fully non-guaranteed. So none of that money went to him, and yet still he decided to come to the Suns on a minimum, and it's a 2-year deal, according to Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic and the ESPN homepage, although Woj did not tweet it that way, but nevertheless, it seems like my guess would be that second year is a player option. Typically, that's what players like to do if they are coming on a minimum when they didn't necessarily have to, is to get that player option. Kevin Love just did something similar with Miami to go to a situation that he wanted to be in. That's the situation, and it proves that the Suns are a destination, again, to use that word one more time, a draw, a place that people want to be, and really a ring-chasing situation, a good situation for players who want to either, in the case of some of the younger guys they re-signed, guys who, are looking for something to jumpstart their careers, earn a big payday, prove themselves in the NBA, or in the case of Gordon, an opportunity to win a title, which he has not done, and also play a major role for that team. You know, it wasn't a situation where Gordon was probably going to play no matter where he went, because he still had a solid season last year. I'm going to talk to you about what Gordon brings to this team momentarily, but it was really just, did he want to, go to a slightly worse situation? The Mavericks, for instance, have their mid-level exception of $12+ million available. Did he want to do that, or did he want to play what might be a similar role but have an even better opportunity to win, potentially, with guys that you never know what players have relationships. I don't know of one between Gordon and Booker or Beal or Durant, but it would not surprise me if there was at the very least some mutual respect and familiarity there, particularly with Durant. And so he chose this situation, and it's a coup. It's the biggest addition that the Suns have made in the non-trade realm. Obviously, Beal was the biggest, but of the minimum roster fill out guys, Gordon is the biggest one. And so let's talk about what he brings. He's going to turn 35 this upcoming season, but he played 57 games 2 years ago and then 69 plus 5 playoff games for a total of 74 this most recent year. Obviously got traded mid-year from the Rockets to the Clippers, and we saw him up close and personal here in Phoenix in that first-round series with the Clippers. And I wouldn't say that he wowed anybody, but at certain moments, I think he did. It just wasn't maybe the most consistent playoff series of his career. He had 19 points in game 1, and I would say game 2, even though he was a little bit inefficient from the field, also got hot from 3, 12 points. Those were both road games, which is a little funny. And then game 4, he was decent with double-digit points as well. So, played low 30s minutes-wise. That entire team just kind of got off track offensively once Kawhi went down, and Russell Westbrook kind of took things over. But he at the very least showed that he can still be a competitive player on a playoff team. And I think, honestly, to me, defensively, he showed some things as an on-ball defender, as a switch defender in the post, where he was not the solution against Kevin Durant, but he was at the very least part of what a competitive defense can be. He's not going to hold the team back per se. Is where I feel like he's at age 35. 6'3" with a 6'9" wingspan. And he was in the 75th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler last season in Houston on 4 possessions per game. Now, this is the part where we get a little nerdy, but it is sometimes the best way to evaluate a player, especially if you're not watching them every day, which I definitely did not. I watched him more as a Clipper probably than I did as a Rocket, if I'm being honest, even though it was just like a quarter of the season. But that's pretty solid numbers. And the thing you have to remember with the Rockets is their spacing was crappy, right? And, at the same time, they weren't really running a lot of coherent offense. So to even have any sort of efficiency as an older player, last year was certainly a bounce back for him. I don't think there's any argument against that. He shot 43% the previous year. He shot 33% the COVID shortened season and had an injury. Then last year, 41% from deep, but didn't really attack the basket. And then last year, kind of a bounce back in terms of a more versatile, holistic game, I would say. Especially with Houston, he was getting to the floater a little bit and the mid-range game. And then I mentioned the pick and roll stuff at the rim. He has pretty much stayed at around 65%, which is better than average, especially for a player his age. And then most notably, really just caught fire with the Clippers. I guess it wasn't as much of a bounce back as I thought. It really was bouncing back over the past 2 years from what he was during that injury-shortened COVID season in 2021. And then he was a pretty efficient spot-up player as well, even in Houston. But again, really, really jumped off. 40+% three-point shooter. I want to say 43% three-point shooter with the Clippers. 1.3 points per possession as a spot-up guy. So that includes shooting as a spot-up player, but also attacking closeouts. If you catch the ball and kind of get into the teeth of the defense, that includes whatever happens in those situations. And he was, as a Clipper, the last part of the year, one of the best guys in the league. And I think the key there, when you look at what he did with the Clippers in the first game of the playoffs, which was his best game, as well as some of the stuff down the stretch in the regular season, the main takeaway that I would have there is the difference from the Rockets situation to the Clippers situation with Kawhi, which was when he looked the best, to the Clippers situation the last 4 games of the playoff series without Kawhi, when he obviously... Actually, I think Kawhi played 2 games. Am I going crazy here? Either way, down the stretch of that playoff series without Kawhi, when he went back to effective enough but not a difference maker, he's going to be playing with superstars in this situation. His job is going to be, of those 3 different types of role, closest to what he was doing with Kawhi. And he shot, again, just another stat to cap this off, he shot 40.2% on wide open threes. So what are the Suns really getting here? They're getting a guy who, in a pinch, can handle the ball. Somebody who can be an initiator with the superstars on this team, or can space the floor, attack closeouts, and be a connective piece. I think that's most often what he is going to be, but the ability to at least have the ball in his hands and not be scared will matter here. And then defensively, again, probably better on ball than as a team defender. I mean, he is only 6'3", even though he does have that wingspan. I've never thought of him as somebody who necessarily creates a lot of turnovers or anything like that. But if you just say we're going to be a little more aggressive defensively, which we already assume the Suns will, and we're going to switch a little more, which maybe not, then I think Gordon can be good. If they play a more conservative defense, more basic defense, maybe he's a slight negative. But at age 35 on a minimum contract, that is a win. This was one of the best players the Suns could have realistically gotten, and they got him, and he's going to make a difference. He is going to play in the playoffs, and he is going to play a lot of minutes for this team. That is a victory. Let's talk about the strategy, though, because Gordon is sort of an exception here. He's really the only veteran minimum. I know that's the name of the contract, no matter who signs it, but he is the only older player the Suns brought in. So let's talk about the risk and reward of that strategy next. First, today's show brought to you by Prize Picks. I'm just diving into baseball. I don't know about all of you, but I think honestly, it might be a little cliche, but the best place to go is Shohei Ohtani on the more. Every single time at Prize Picks, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they're going to go more or less than their Prize Picks projection, and that's it. 2 to 6 players, no competing against other people, pools, leagues, head-to-head, nothing. It is just you versus those projections. Baseball, as well as the WNBA, obviously tennis and golf throughout the summer, and more. All sports you love available on Prize Picks to make those picks. Entries can be made quickly. They offer safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states, including Arizona, as well as Canada. So download the Prize Picks app now. Go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play this awesome daily fantasy sports game. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That means that if you deposit $100, Prize Picks matches that up to $100. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up to get that instant deposit match up to $100. Here's what the Suns' strategy was in free agency. I think we can say now. Again, roster full. There is a potential to cut Isaiah Todd because his contract is very, very cheap, and he is not somebody that I imagine figures heavily into the Suns' plans. They do have a two-way spot open for him if they did want to keep him around, but just put him on that type of a contract and open up one more spot. But for all intents and purposes, the roster is full and the strategy is clear. They targeted undervalued young guys on bad or mediocre teams, right? They targeted guys who had size at their position, athleticism, and positional versatility, positional flexibility. And then, as the Suns tend to do, but as most great teams tend to do, they targeted shooting. Makes sense. You can go back and listen to the last show in this feed if you missed it, but I praised a lot of those moves. I think Yuta Watanabe, Keita Bates-Diop, those are the most exciting ones to me, but even the Jordan Goodwin acquisition in the Beal trade, as well as the Drew Eubanks signing, have my attention at the very least. So I like it. I'm not here to criticize necessarily, but I do think that going in that direction was a choice, and it comes with potential consequences, right? They did not go after more reliable vets, a la Eric Gordon, right? They did not sign 6 Eric Gordons. Maybe you could say Josh Okogie qualifies as something of a more reliable re-signing. I think in the regular season, Damian Lee certainly qualifies, but you even just look around the league, and as I was about to hit record, Justin Holiday is going to Denver. He counts, right? Russell Westbrook went back to the Clippers. Cody Zeller, I believe, is going to the Pelicans. Patrick Beverley to the Sixers. Thomas Bryant to the Miami Heat. These are guys who I would even maybe throw Josh Richardson in there, who also went to the Heat. Kevin Love. Those guys, it's a little bit maybe of a comfort thing since Love and Richardson both played for Miami. But either way, that's a pretty decent list of guys who the Suns theoretically could have gone after, but did not, because they favored the undervalued guys on the Portlands and the San Antonios and the Brooklyns of the league, rather than, old guys who might be a little more stable, right? So the Suns are betting on upside. They're betting on continued improvement. They're betting on the potential to really get good value on the contracts. Guys who are on the upswing, who with around playing next to better players and with more of an opportunity, the Suns are betting those guys are even better than what they already were. And they already were fairly good, right? But they're risking stability. They're risking just in the regular season especially. Because if anything major happens injury-wise in the playoffs, the Suns are probably screwed no matter what. I mean, most teams are, but especially top-heavy teams. But I mean, look, the Nuggets, who I'll talk about in the last segment here, if Nikola Jokic gets hurt, it doesn't matter, right? So we're not talking about worst-case scenarios, but even just imagine this, right? Kevin Durant. I don't even think this is a pejorative or any sort of criticism or inappropriate thing to say. He's going to miss 20 or so games. Unless the Suns are able to play him way, way, way fewer minutes, which I don't expect, he's going to have some sort of likely lower body injury that comes along. He's had the same exact MCL sprain twice in a row in consecutive seasons. Obviously, coming off the Achilles a while back, foot injury 10 years ago or so. We know that's coming. It's just what happens when you're in your mid-30s. If that happens, when that happens, you're starting two suddenly of Okogie, Bates, Diop, Eric Gordon, Yuta Watanabe, whatever the forward rotation is. You go from starting one of those guys who you're iffy about to two, right? And I doubt it's Gordon. He's probably the most trustworthy one, but he's not a 4, whereas Durant is. So, and suddenly that's a quarter of your season where you're entrusting a starting spot when you already have one of your 5 starting spots that's in flux a little bit with maybe it's Okogie, maybe it's Payne, maybe it's Gordon. Now you add another one. And suddenly Keita Bates-Diop is starting for a team that's trying to keep pace at the top of the West and at least have, home court advantage in the first round or whatever the Suns' goals are. DeAndre Ayton, right? Good for an ankle sprain. And I point out him not to just pick nits. I personally don't think the Booker and Beal injury stuff is a major red flag, major concern. It happens. If it happens this year again, great. But I don't think those guys are some sort of major risk. They're in, their late 20s, early 30s, and they've had some weird stuff happen. But Ayton is a lock to sprain his ankle, right? That happens. If you do that and Denver or the Lakers are on the schedule, once again, the reason I point this particular situation out is that Eubanks and Metu are your backup bigs on this team. And suddenly those guys are guarding Jokic, guarding Davis. Maybe it's even the Kings to take off just the best team possible, like the Nuggets are, and just say, it's the Kings and it's Sabonis. Do you want Chimezie Metu guarding Domantas Sabonis? Do you want Drew Eubanks guarding Domantas Sabonis? Ask the Blazers how that went, right? Those are guys who, they were starters last year. They were high minutes players last year, and they were negatives for their team, all things considered. You're betting on them getting better in a better situation, but that's still what they are, right? Whereas I don't think Thomas Bryant or Cody Zeller or any Danilo Gallinari even, who has not signed yet but might, I don't think they're fixing that problem. It's not like I'm saying, look, you're talking about minimum guys. If any of them were a solution to your depth problem, then they're probably not minimum guys. But they've at least been starters, right? And had to compete against the best players in the NBA on winning teams. I mean, Cody Zeller just did it in the playoffs, and his minutes were negatives most of the time for Miami, but he still was out there competing and not killing them, right? Same thing could be said for various of Patrick Beverley, right? I mean, he's been on playoff teams the past 2 years. The young guys the Suns have signed now, those guys have not been in a situation like that, right? They have not been backup centers in NBA Finals appearances, or in Patrick Beverley's case, starting on a team that got to the play-in and, guarding the opposing team's best play. Like, these are just not situations that they've been in. It's a fine bet. Again, I like the signings, but to go so far in that direction, that is the risk that you take. That's why I thought that keeping Cam Payne was important. Why I would have tried to keep Torrey Craig. And why I think the Suns could still, again, cut Isaiah Todd and maybe add another older player if one comes available. And I don't think there's any rush to do that. Todd probably doesn't have a large market. He's probably looking at a G League contract or a two-way contract anyway. So if that's what the Suns are going to give him and he's on a great team and might actually play if some injuries happen, I don't think he's going to leave. And if he does, it's Isaiah Todd, right? So that's the one last move if somebody kind of lingers on the market that the Suns could make. But the one, just to point this out too, because I'm sure it's out there, Jock Landale, right? He goes to the Rockets. I still think Landale next season, I would expect him to have a better year than Drew Eubanks, personally. And I didn't watch Drew Eubanks every day, and I did watch Jock Landale every day. So I admit that I'm biased. I'm coming at it with more information on one guy. But if the Suns got word that Brook Lopez was likely to go back to Milwaukee and that Landale was going to become Houston's backup plan and get a big offer with their cap space or their whatever salary cap flexibility that they have that the Suns obviously didn't have, then you just cut your losses. And I think moving quickly to find a replacement in Eubanks, make the case to him to be basically your backup center, that's not a bad backup plan. So I'm not as bummed about that one, but Craig doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying he's the greatest player ever. I understand that he's in his mid-30s. I understand that his shooting is not reliable, but he's been here for years. He's comfortable here. I've always gotten the impression that he's a well-liked locker room guy, especially with Josh Okogie. Their lockers were next to each other. They always seem to have a good relationship, and why not, But I don't make these calls. We still don't know fully what will happen, but that's my read. That's my biggest takeaway on the strategy of what it offers them, which is the upside, and what it takes away, which is just the reliability and the comfort of knowing Cody Zeller is right there and he can just eat minutes if we need him to. They don't have that, and it will affect how the regular season plays out. On to the Western Conference. We're not going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rankings, but the Suns solidified where they were in the pecking order, and I'll tell you why next. First, a quick break. And we're back. Let's close things out. The Los Angeles Lakers, to me, are the biggest winners of the West so far. Now, we know Damian Lillard may change teams. He's probably not going somewhere else in the West. Maybe the Clippers get an awesome deal for James Harden and things change. But right now, the Lakers have added Gabe Vincent, Taurean Prince, and Jackson Hayes, all varying degrees of solid value bets, and they kept Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura. So and D'Angelo Russell. So you're basically saying that they are bringing back last year's team, last year's playoff rotation, because they kept Jared Vanderbilt, and adding Vincent and Prince to it. Pretty good. I think that made them better. The Clippers have so far added KJ Martin and kept Russell Westbrook, but obviously we think there's maybe a Harden trade coming. Warriors kept Draymond. They're expected to sign Dario Saric, which I think is a really good fit, but is not likely to move the needle in a substantial way. Memphis Grizzlies lost Dillon Brooks and Tyus Jones. They added Marcus Smart and Derrick Rose, who may or may not be worthy of being listed off there, but is coming to this team. I don't know about the Memphis Grizzlies. Sacramento Kings run it back with Chris Duarte and Sasha, I believe is his first name. I could just be completely making that up. The EuroLeague MVP, I think his last name is Vesnikov or Vezenkov. He will be there. I feel very, whatever. I did not look at his name and I feel bad. Euros get a bad shake when it comes to their names. Oh well. I think the Wolves, Pelicans, and Thunder are basically the same. So, to me, I don't know if Suns fans are going to like me saying this, but I just have to be realistic, right? To me, the Suns still should be underdogs to Denver. I think that they are not as deep, not as well-rounded, and not as big as Denver. And I think all of those things matter. In terms of seeding in the regular season, I would imagine the Nuggets are a pretty good bet to get the 1 seed again if they can stay healthy. And that is the one thing the Nuggets really got lucky with last year. After a bunch of years of terrible injury luck, they basically had no major injuries. Jamal Murray had no problems coming back, and everybody was healthy for the entirety of the playoffs. That is a luxury that they may not have again. They did lose Bruce Brown, but the size part and the continuity and the well-roundedness of being, a balanced team. They're obviously going to lean more offense than defense, especially with Brown gone as a point of attack defender, but they still have KCP. They still have Aaron Gordon. I would imagine Christian Brown takes a bigger role on and is a pretty decent wing defender option. And Peyton Watson, I think, is somebody I believe in a lot over there, as well as their new draft pick. So I just think they still have to be there. They're a lock to get a great offensive possession every time that the ball is in their hands because of Nikola Jokic. And that is almost impossible for me to knock down until we see more basketball played. But at the end of the Denver series, the Suns just had 3 players that they could trust. And by game 6, when Ayton went out, only 2, right? Now to me, they have at least 5. Book, Durant, and Ayton, who were the 3 from that series, as well as now Bradley Beal, a legitimate additional all-star, and now Eric Gordon, and I think he belongs on that list. He is an injury risk, and obviously in his mid-30s, there is a possibility that he just falls off completely, but I doubt that happens. The fact that he bounced back from an injury-riddled season 2 years ago and has been on a good team now with the Clippers and proven he can still hold up, I have a hard time imagining it completely crumbles from beneath him. I think he counts on that list, so that's 5. They went up from 3 to 5, and one of them is an all-star. I mean, with what they had at their disposal, which I will remind people was a bunch of pick swaps, Chris Paul, Landry Shamet and DeAndre Ayton, they have done an excellent job. You add Payne to that mix, which I wouldn't call him a trustworthy player, but depending on the day, he can be. And then some interesting bets when it comes to young guys. Goodwin, Watanabe, Bates-Diop, especially in my opinion. Those are the three I think have the greatest likelihood of exploding, breaking out next year. They probably got closer to the Nuggets, and depending on how you feel, I would say that they're tied with the Lakers, is how I would put it. I just think the Lakers are deeper. And I understand they only have 2 stars, but really, no, the Suns have 3 stars. The Suns have 3 stars and the Lakers have 2. I guess it really just comes down to the Lakers. If you do the list of how many trustworthy guys they have, it's probably more than 5, right? I would say it's LeBron, AD, Reeves, Hachimura, Vincent. LeBron, AD, Reeves, Hachimura, Vincent. Is that it? I guess it is. But they have Russell, they have Prince, they have Vanderbilt. I would say those 3 are more reliable than the Suns' next 3. I think I could go either way. I just don't want to discount what the Lakers did because they did play Denver really hard. I understand the Suns did better than them. I don't know. I don't want to overvalue depth. Maybe I'm doing that. Let me say the Suns are a slight step ahead of the Lakers. They separated themselves from the rest of the pack. I'll put them ahead of the Lakers by a hair, and they're closer to Denver than they were by the end of Game 6 of that series. That is a win. And again, Warriors, Grizzlies, Kings, Wolves, Pelicans, Thunder, I think all of those teams are basically the same, if not potentially worse, as things stand right now. That is a great place to be. If you tell me that the Suns are able to roll into a top 4 seed again next year and not have to go crazy in the regular season to do that, and stack up better than they did against the Lakers, against the Warriors, Clippers, Nuggets in the postseason. That's what the offseason is supposed to be, is an ability to get closer to your competition and extend the advantages that you already have. The Suns did that. It's a win. If we only think about it as how do they match up to these exact teams, I think that's just a little silly. I don't think the Nuggets are the mid 2010s Warriors. This is not a bona fide dynasty. This is a team with holes. This is a team that leans offense. This is a team that has injury concerns that did not manifest when they won the title. I'm not saying, again, I have Denver first, but the Suns are right there. All right, that'll wrap us up. Back tomorrow with more free agency and offseason talk. Summer League starts over the weekend, so we'll get you ready for that and start recapping some of those games as well. Our first look at the Suns' only draft pick of the 2020s, which is Toumani Camara. We'll talk about him as the week goes along and throughout the offseason. So hit follow or subscribe wherever you're finding this show. We're free and available everywhere. And I will catch you all tomorrow.